Hi, I'm recording your bedtime story from here in the classroom. We are in the middle of reading Palace Wagon Family. Actually, we're kind of just at the beginning of Palace Wagon Family. We stopped off and they had crossed um, a major river, and they're going to keep running into rivers as they cross the Great Plains. They had just passed a place called Scott's Bluff. So, all of these people that were traveling westward, there were landmarks that you would see when you were traveling so that you would know you were on the right path. And so, Chimney Rock, Scott's Bluff, those were all landmarks that wagon trains passed by. I wonder if the Indians around here are still friendly, Jimmy said. He had not long to wonder. As the wagons neared Fort Bernard, a small fur trading post 10 miles east of Fort Laramie, they passed a whole party of Sioux, who looked as if they might be on the warpath. "Grandma's Indians," Patty cried out when she saw them approaching. They did look just as the old lady had described them. The Sioux tribe of Native Americans is a huge tribe. In fact, it's such a big group of people that it's broken down into sub-tribes. And the Sioux lived on the Great Plains, and their culture was a horse culture. They traded horses, they trained horses, and so they lived on the Great Plains. And all these settlers are coming across their land, which probably irritated them quite a bit. What a sight it was when they emerged from behind a red mound of earth and moved out into the sunlight. The braves were smeared with war paint and armed with hunting knives, tomahawks, bows, and arrows. The chiefs wore great feather bonnets, while the squaws and papooses were gorgeous in white doeskin suits trimmed with beads. Not one detail of their elaborate dress escaped Virginia's watchful eyes. "They don't even notice us in our linsey dresses and sunbonnets," she said, almost in disappointment as the wagons were driven up to the strongly fortified walls around the buildings of the American Fur Company. "You didn't want them to notice you, did you?" Mrs. Reed asked in surprise. "I guess Puss would like to do a little dressing up herself," Mr. Reed remarked with a chuckle. "Isn't her birthday on the 28th of June?" It was the 26th when they arrived at Fort Bernard. They were told that great numbers of Sioux were gathering on the plains. "If they find out what Keseberg did, they'll have our scalps," Virginia whispered to her friends. She dared not mention the man's name above a whisper, for now she knew that what she thought was a wounded buffalo was actually an elaborately beaded buffalo robe being carried away from an Indian burial rack. Mr. Keseberg had been in the act of stealing it when her father caught him and made him put it back. "You know these Indians wrap their dead chiefs in buffalo skins and raise them up on poles instead of burying them. Pa wouldn't tell me about it at first," Virginia finished. "He still gets mad every time I mention it." "He has an awful temper," Mary Murphy spoke up. "I heard him telling Mr. Breen that those Germans ought to be banished from the company. He said that they were inviting an Indian attack." The next chapter is called Growing Up with America. Virginia was impressed by the dignity of the Sioux, but nobody trusted them. Already there had been some trouble up ahead, although not with the Indians. Colonel Russell had resigned in favor of ex-Governor Boggs, and then insisted, amid shouts of mocking laughter, that he was the captain still. Secretly, Virginia wished that her father had been chosen. "They should have let you banish Mr. Keseberg." "Why didn't they?" she asked him. "Well, there were some hot words over it," Mr. Reed admitted. "Some of the men thought I had been too harsh with him. Perhaps they were right. We do have his wife and 2 little children to consider." Virginia thought about this a minute. "The way he beats his wife, I should think that she and the children would be better off without him." "You're wrong there, daughter," Mr. Reed told her. "No child is better off without a father. I understood that almost 12 years ago when I married your mother, and then you became our little baby girl." "Oh, Papa." For no reason that she could understand, Virginia began to cry. Mr. Reed held her close for a moment and then left to see that the guards were posted outside the circle of wagons. The Sioux were known to be warlike. "They're on their way to settle a fight between 2 other tribes of Indians," Captain Boggs announced the following day. They're like They're like us, he added with a chuckle. They can't agree among themselves, but they've promised us an escort. Virginia was delighted with this news. If we're escorted by Indians, it will be safe for me to ride my pony, won't it, Pa? She asked Mr. Reed. I would not be riding a pony if I were around a group of people that were obsessed with horses and traded horses and used horses as money, because they're going to want her pony. Right? If she has this beautiful horse, they would probably want to hide it because it's going to cause a problem, because the Sioux are going to want the pony, and they're going to want to trade. They're going to want to trade for the pony, because the lots of the Plains tribes were horses were their stock in trade, right? So the pony's probably going to cause a problem if she's out riding the pony. He smiled. I guess I can allow you that much pleasure. Happy birthday, daughter. Now I suppose you'll be telling people that you're going on 13. Virginia had been saying that she was going on 12 for almost a year. Mary Murphy tells people she's 16, said Patty, who was 9 in February. But she doesn't look any older than you do, Puss. I don't see why big girls are in such a hurry to grow up. Virginia tossed her head in what she considered a grown-up manner and explained, It's so that they'll be noticed, Pet. They had arrived at Fort Laramie the night before. Soon they would be leaving. Patty shivered and said, I don't want to be noticed by the Indians. The Sioux were everywhere, pressing close to the wagons and asking for trinkets, which were liberally handed out to them. The little boys were speechless with admiration and wonder. Patty stood beside Virginia, big-eyed. Every now and then she would cry out, Look, look. It does seem queer to be giving away presents on my birthday instead of getting them, Virginia whispered. When they were ready to leave the fort, they found themselves surrounded by Indians. They looked very handsome and impressive to Virginia as they advanced 2 abreast and rode ahead of the wagons. She and several of her friends were on horseback and had a good view of them. Look, look, the younger children were calling from the wagons. The Indians had halted in open ranks. As the wagons passed between their lines, they took green twigs from their mouths and tossed them. What are they doing? Virginia wondered. Some of the girls who were with her became fearful and pulled back their horses. Virginia was curious now, and she rode on ahead. It was soon discovered that this was a token of friendship. Patty and the little boys began catching the twigs and waving them back at the Indians. They've shown their friendship. Now they expect us to show ours, Mrs. Reed said as she tossed her coral necklace to one of the squaws. This attracted attention to the palace wagon. The braves pointed and showed great curiosity at the funny little smokestack sticking through the top. One of them caught a glimpse of his war paint and feathers in the looking glass, which hung opposite the door. So if you were a Native American and you lived on the Great Plains, you had never probably seen yourself other than reflected in water, because mirrors were made out of glass, and the native people in North America didn't have that technology to make glass, and so they didn't have mirrors. So they saw some of the members of the tribe saw themselves in the mirror that was in their wagon, and they were like seeing themselves for the first time. So it was probably pretty exciting for them. So they keep looking at themselves in the mirror like, look, this is me. One of them caught a glimpse of his war paint and feathers in the looking glass, which hung opposite the door. Good, good, he grunted, pleased with his own reflection. Beckoning to his comrades, he pointed to it, and they all pushed in front to see themselves in the glass. Just then Virginia rode up on Billy. She was not at all afraid of these Indians, only amused by them. They were making such funny faces at themselves that she simply had to laugh. At that sound they turned and they saw her pony. Immediately they forgot everything else in the admiration of him. They swarmed around Virginia, grunting and nodding and gesturing. She could no longer complain that they were not paying attention to her. What do they want? She asked. But only Indians were near enough to hear her, and few of them spoke English. A lot of Indian tribes spoke French because back in the 1600s and 1700s, There were a lot of French trappers that were wandering around North America. They were trapping little animals and buying and trading furs. And so a lot of tribes that lived on the Great Plains spoke French. And so, which is kind of interesting. And later on in the year, we're going to read a little bit about Lewis and Clark, and we'll learn about this French trapper that was on their journey with them. So there were a long time ago, there were probably French people wandering around in North America before there were English speakers. And so many tribes understood French and could speak French. So the Sioux didn't really, in this case, this branch of the Sioux, this group of people didn't speak English very well. What do they want? She asked, but only Indians were near enough to hear her, and few of them spoke English. Finally, her father rode up on his gray mare, and then the Indians were bringing buffalo robes, tan buckskin, and beaded moccasins to place before her. Elaborately woven grass robes were added to the pile, and Mr. Reed was informed by grunts and signs that these things were all offered for the pony and its rider. So they want to trade her, too. This was a pretty common thing. A lot of Native American tribes would, like if, let's say that you're in a tribe and you have a war party and you're fighting another tribe, and you would take hostages, you would take prisoners, and then those prisoners would become your slaves. You would have them work for you, right? And so they would become workers in the tribe. So they're wanting to trade her, too. They want her and her pony. So she's made a big mistake, right, in riding the horse around and kind of, being in front of everybody and getting attention, because now she has attention. They want to take her back to their community and her horse. Probably mostly the horse, more so than her. Mr. Reed was informed by grunts and signs that all these things were offered for the pony and its rider. They want to buy me, Pa. The chief wants to make an Indian princess out of me. I wouldn't say a princess. He probably wanted her to, do work. That's what they're trying to tell you, giggled Virginia. How much do you think I'm worth? Mr. Reed tried to make the warriors understand that his daughter and her pony were not for sale, but they seemed to think that he was telling them their offer was not high enough. There was more grunting and head shaking, and then one of the braves triumphantly brought out an old coat which had evidently belonged to a soldier. He seemed very much surprised that its fine brass buttons were not enough of an inducement. The Indians pressed closer. Their attentions were becoming a little embarrassing. Virginia didn't mind it much. It made her feel very grown up and important, but it made her father angry. Virginia, you dismount at once, he ordered. One of the men will take care of Billy. Get into the wagon now. So if you're in a situation with people that speak two different languages, right, and neither of them understand each other very well, and maybe they didn't even want her, maybe they just wanted the pony, right? They don't really know because they don't speak the same language. So there's going to be a lot of misunderstanding. And so her stepdad is saying, get in the wagon, quit messing around. We're going to get rid of the horse, and then we're going to try to communicate a little bit better. Virginia, you dismount at once, he ordered. One of the men will take care of Billy. Get into the wagon now. When Mr. Reed spoke in that tone of voice, using her full name instead of her nickname, Virginia was never slow to obey. Leaving Milt Elliott to look after her pony, she climbed into the wagon. At once she began telling her mother and the younger children all that had happened. I was almost an Indian princess. They wanted to buy me as well as Billy, she related, but Papa only smiled at them and shook his head. I hope they knew he meant it. Mrs. Reed was apprehensive. She was keeping Tommy close to her side, but the little fellow would still peek around her skirts and laugh at the Indians swarming about the wagon. So here's a little picture that shows her sitting on her horse, and they're kind of surrounding her, and they're looking at her horse going, that is a nice pony. There was no holding Jimmy back. He was just as curious as Virginia herself. How many Indians are out there? He questioned. Virginia picked up a field glass intended to look back and find out how long the line really was. So she takes out a thing like that looks like a it's like binoculars, only it only has one, like a looking glass. It only has one tube. And you would, in the olden days, you would pull that out and it would make kind of a clicking sound. You would make it get longer, right? You guys have probably seen those on TV shows or like cartoons. They pull out a looking glass and they pull it open and it makes a clicking sound because it's made out of metal. Well, guess what? If you're standing with a bunch of people that don't know what a looking glass is and you make that sound, it sounds like a gun. So they're going to think that she has some kind of weapon, right? And rightfully so. They're going to be afraid. The Sioux are going to think that she's got some kind of weapon and she's like, going to hurt them. So again, lots of confusion because they don't all speak the same language and they're not understanding each other. Let's see. Virginia picked up a field glass, intending to look back and find out how long the line really was. But as she pulled it out, it made a little click. At that, the warriors jumped back, wheeled their ponies, and scattered in all directions because it sounded like a gun being cocked. And they were like, "Whoa!" And so they just got out of the way. "They think you've got a gun," cried Jimmy. "Do it again, do it again." Virginia turned to her mother and laughed. "You need not be afraid of them, Mamma dear," she said. "I can fight the whole Sioux tribe with a spyglass. If they come around with any more birthday presents, just watch me take it up and make them run." So she's kind of being stupid right now and being a jerk, right? She's saying, ha ha ha, they're afraid of a looking glass. Really, they're thinking they've never seen that before. They don't know if it's a weapon. The Indians were still going by. They were several days in passing, not on account of the length of the wagon train, but because of the great number of Sioux. They seemed almost they seemed almost like part of the scenery. Here at either side of the trail were strange flat-topped mounds of red earth with grass and sometimes flowers growing on them. This weird country, showing its age almost like an old person, made her homesick for Illinois and the friends that she had left behind. "We'll drink a toast to them on the 4th of July," her father told her. "We have it all arranged. At the same time, they will be drinking to us and wishing us good health and a happy journey." So I would guess there's a lot of opportunity there was a lot of opportunity for misunderstanding between the settlers and the people who had been living here for thousands of years. And a lot of opportunity to make mistakes and end up in fights and battles when really you're just not understanding each other's language or each other's intentions. I think that the tribes that lived on the Great Plains, they saw all of these people coming across to California and it just seemed endless, like an endless supply of people. And it probably scared them that, yeah, these settlers are coming here and they're taking all of our land. Right. At the same time, I think that the settlers were just as scared of the Indians as the Indians were of the settlers. Right. They saw these settlers coming and they kind of knew this is not good. There's too many people coming here, going across our land. Right. All right. We will stop right there. Thanks for joining me.